motion that's been submitted and withdrawn last week, and another motion that you're not yet aware of. I want to say that those of us who are honorary officers have been elected by the deputies to advocate on behalf of the community, and we are fully accountable to you. And we have to represent and welcome the huge diversity of opinion, which may sometimes be challenging. We all know that. But we handle it through negotiation, through discussion, through consulting our communities. And statements, as you know, may be a fine line of judgment. Having minority opinions does not mean that these will be taken as Board of Deputy policy by issuing motions, whether they are a vote of no confidence or other motions. And I want to say, however, that we welcome debate at the Board of Deputies, as we're going to have later. But debate also should be by agreement. And the most important thing that we can do as a community is to debate respectfully and treat each other as equals with respect. Now is a time for unity and not for Jews to be divided at these very challenging times. Let us focus on what we have in common and learn to disagree with tolerance and respect, because our strength is in our diversity and our respect for others and our principled stance to issues. Thank you. I would now like to pay tribute to Jo Wageman, the first and past female president. Jo was ahead of her time, and it was a remarkable achievement for her to be the first Board of Deputies president from the year 2000 to 2003. And it's taken another 15 years for me to be elected as a woman president and with other female colleagues. Jo was the head teacher of JFS from 1985 to 1993, and she transformed the school to become an outstanding educational establishment. I wanted to look at what Jo thought of herself, so I looked at her description when she applied to be a patient governor in 2016 for UCL, part of the NHS. Jo described herself as a born and bred Londoner. She received her OBE on the recommendation of her ex-students, which I think is incredible. She had humanity. She said, large organisations must take particular care to preserve their humanity and never forget that they are there to serve a vulnerable group of people. Her values and morals have stayed with her throughout her life, and she will be sorely missed. I would like now to call up Flo Kaufman and Paul Edlin, who will say a tribute. Thank you. Please take the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm here today to talk just a little bit about my colleague and friend, Jo Wageman. I was a vice president at the time when she was the president, and I always knew my place, always used to be that little bit behind Jo because she was the president. We got on very well. I just want to mention something that happened, and it's got a recent corollary. When King Mohammed VI became King of Morocco, the first thing he did was he sent a message to the Board of Deputies to say that he would like to meet a few of us because he wanted to be involved in the peace process in some way. So a group of us, of honorary officers, were invited to Morocco. We spent 2 or 3 days in Morocco, where incidentally the traffic lights are always green. And he took us on. We had a really splendid time. Now, I think what Jo would like, I don't know whether she knew, but on the 7th of October this year, the King of Morocco decided and issued a decree that the Holocaust should be taught in all Moroccan schools. And I think that that is an instance of Jo, in the words of Laura Marx, building bridges, because that is something that I think Jo would, I hope she would have been aware of it, but if not, I think she had something to do with it. She was, as I say, a good friend, a delightful companion. We have many, many years together of doing various public works. I had a huge amount of respect for her, as was echoed by our president, and she was indeed a trailblazer. And if you look at this top table here today, we've got 4 women on the top table. And I think that Jo Wageman had a lot to do with that. So she'd be pleased about that. So her memory will live on and will be a blessing to all of us. Thank you.
I don't want to speak for too long about Jo. She was a wonderful person and a great friend to me. What I will say is that she was the first woman president of the board after 245 years. And it was really shocking looking back that it took so long for a woman to get to that position. But anyway, here we are now. And as a president, to me, I was fairly junior on the board. I was a vice chairman of the international division. And I remember when there was a problem that I had, I wanted to discuss, she didn't just speak to me on the phone, she invited me over to her home to have tea with her to discuss it. And she always listened. She was always a very good person. And as I remember it, at the time in Israel, she was a staunch religious Zionist, and at the time Israel was going through some very difficult times with the collapse of the Oslo Accords and the Palestinian Intifada, and she stood strong and took her place as Vice President of the World Jewish Congress and the European Jewish Congress to stand by Israel and was staunch in her support of Israel. Unfortunately, her presidency was marred by a couple of internal divisions. She was the last president of the board before the establishment of the Jewish Leadership Council. She always was unhappy with the level of access she had to government, but looking back on it, her level of access to government would be envied by the current platform. She had access at that time. I remember Jack Straw was either Home Secretary or Foreign Secretary. She was able to phone him up whenever she wanted. She had fantastic access, and she was very able. And she did so much for the board, and she will be remembered by me and many others with huge affection for all she did.
Deputies, can I ask you to stand for 1 minute in the memory of Jo? Thank you. Where is Roberts? The next item on the agenda are the minutes of the board meeting held on the 15th of July. I've received one notification from Robert Stone, who says that the list of deputies standing to election for the Afeni division correctly records that 19 candidates were standing, but only 18 candidates were listed, and his name was omitted from the list. So that will be amended. Would you like to say your name and constituency?
Robert Sachs, Belsize Square Synagogue. Madam President, there's an omission in the minutes. At the last meeting, I asked the chairman of the Defence Division, whether she would press the police and the Crown Prosecution Service to prosecute hate crimes against Jews. This was her first meeting in that capacity, and she had a little difficulty, and you stepped in, madam, and your response was that this was a matter for the CST. I disagree with that, but I should like my question to be minuted. Thank you.
Thank you. Other than that, can the minutes please be approved? Thank you. We have a guest speaker that I would like to welcome. Naomi Dixon, would you please come to the podium? So, Naomi is the Chief Executive of Jewish Women's Aid, and she's going to be speaking on the launch of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So may we, in the way we know, give Naomi a very big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to start, though, before I talk about our forthcoming campaign, by telling you a little bit about what we do. And in order to do that, I'm going to tell you about Susie, who phoned up our helpline about a year ago. She's 30 years old with 2 children. Susie started off by telling us, "I don't think my marriage is going particularly well, and I'm not quite sure what to do." We invited her in to talk to us, and through the course of a few meetings with her new caseworker, it transpired that Susie had been subjected to an ongoing pattern of abuse which had escalated throughout the course of her marriage. Domestic violence doesn't start with a black eye. She had not had any access to finances, she hadn't been able to get a job, she had been subject to various mind games that had escalated to the point that she was scared to leave her home. Susie was really scared, and she phoned us for help because she didn't know what to do, but she hadn't identified what was happening to her as domestic abuse or domestic violence. The trigger for her phoning us was after her husband became increasingly aggressive with her, both verbally and physically. She was worried he was going to start on her children, and that made her really, really frightened, even more frightened than she'd been for years. So she picked up the phone to us, and what did we do with her? We talked to her, we identified with her that she was living in an abusive relationship. Typically, women are affected by domestic abuse 35 times before they pick up the phone and ask anybody for help. At Jewish Women's Aid, our studies internally show that Jewish women stay for longer in those abusive relationships. Typically, the women who call us have been living in an abusive relationship for 11.5 years. These are women from all your communities, from across the breadth of the community and from every organisation represented here. We offered Susie ongoing casework, we gave her advice, we gave her access to legal support, welfare benefits and housing. We put her in touch with therapists who supported her children, and we gave her counselling. We provided the soft and supportive landing that she needed, and we offered a confidential service to her, so she knew that nobody else was going to know that she was working with us. And we helped her build her confidence, which was at rock bottom. Susie has now moved on in her life, and I'm really pleased to tell you that she is one of 600 women a year that we're working with at the moment. So why have I come here today? I've come here because the 25th of November marks the annual United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's a day that we mark, and so do other domestic abuse agencies, not only in the UK but throughout the world. And we mark it by creating and developing a campaign, which I'm really happy to say that we're partnering with the Board of Deputies for the second year running. And the aim of the campaign is to raise awareness in the community about the nature of domestic abuse. So what can we ask you to do? Well, we ask all the rabbis and community leaders to speak out about abuse and to talk to their communities and to tell them, yes, this is an issue in the community. Women like Susie are affected. This is where to go, and Jewish Women's Aid is here to help. We have got posters and literature at the office. Please do contact me either via the board or via our website, and please get in touch because we'd love to send a speaker to your organisation, send posters for you to put up, give you some resources to help you to arrange a discussion group or a lecture. And I'd also like to ask you to support us, either by encouraging people to support us financially, but really to raise awareness via our website, Twitter, Facebook, and the online campaigns that we have. It's really, really hard to talk about domestic abuse. I can see you going like this. It's a really difficult topic, but it is real. It's happening in our community, and we are here. So please do join with me and the Board of Deputies to support the women who need it so much. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Can you come to them? Thank you.
Am I doing it?
Denise Lester, Deputy for South Hampstead Synagogue. I was involved with JWA when it first set up. And, Denise Lester, Deputy South Hampstead United Synagogue. I was involved with JWA back in the day when Judy Yaziskin set it up, and have always been a supporter and on your legal group. I think that there is, and I'd like you, my question is that there is a misconception that domestic abuse is just physical abuse. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate about the various types of abuse. You indicated the financial control, but also with particular reference to our community, how there can be perpetrators of abuse, but yet they remain muckers, important people in synagogues. It's hushed up. There's the concept of shalom bayit in the home, and what the community needs to do to safeguard the children of domestic abuse as well as the victims, because the children do suffer emotional and physical harm, and social services can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. You've made quite a few really interesting points. I think, firstly, to clarify, absolutely, domestic abuse can take a huge variety of forms, including physical violence, but not exclusively. So we also see a lot of emotional abuse, we see mind games, we see financial abuse, we see sexual abuse. And actually cutting through all of those is an imbalance of power and control. So what that means is that the person who is being abused is unable to push back and regain her power and control in the relationship. And so she becomes controlled by the perpetrator over a period of time. Within the Jewish community, as I've mentioned, women do tend to stay for longer in abusive relationships. And I think that is because of all the reasons that we can probably think of about, trying to give the impression of a happy home, because we're very family-centred community and we like our families to stay together as much as possible. At the same time, if somebody is unsafe or their children are unsafe, unequivocally, I would always tell that person to reach out for support as much as possible. And as far as children, yes, absolutely. If a child has been witnessing abuse, it's as if that child has been abused, and we would consider making a safeguarding referral for that child, and we take that very, very seriously, and we would encourage the community to do so as well.
Including going to the communities on an informal basis, because people can walk around synagogues, they can do security rotas. I know of one instance where a family was, involved, and there has to be a subtlety, but, when people come to the communities and they disclose this to the rabbi, or Rabbonim or the boards of management, it needs to be taken seriously. It is a safeguarding issue. It's not something to be taken lightly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah. Please come to the microphone. Brenda Friedman from ALEF.
Hello. My name is Brenda Friedman from the Northwest Reformed Synagogue. I know at one time you had... I know at one time you had a safe house of refuge. I'm not sure if you still have that, and I wonder whether you're going to attempt to get one again. And the other question is about women, or men and women, from very orthodox Haredi communities who have no understanding of the ways of the world, and when they have this problem, they don't even know how to read a newspaper or fill in a form, and I wonder what you do about that.
Thank you. So currently Jewish Women's Aid does not have a refuge. That's in line with a lot of other domestic violence agencies nationally, where we're seeing that a small proportion of the women who come for help need refuge space. So actually what we've found is that it's much more helpful to be able to put some money into legal support for the women so that they can get an occupation order or a legal remedy into place, which will mean that they're able to stay in their home with their children and the perpetrator needs to leave, which actually on balance is a better solution for them and the children. It's very, very difficult. A refuge is always an absolute last resort. If we need to put somebody in emergency accommodation, we've got access to that and we can find it, and that's never a problem. But our aim really is to keep a woman in her own home as much as she wants to. And as far as the Orthodox community is concerned, we work across the breadth of the community. Some parts of the community do have limited access to information, but we work as hard as we can to keep awareness high in that part of the community so women can reach us where they need.
Thank you. I seem to have lost that's it better. 2 questions which will have to be quite brief. Thank you.
Susan Pascoe, Nairstraw Community Centre. So there's a domestic abuse and violence bill going through Parliament, and my question is, when Jewish Women's Aid responded to the government consultation on it, did you, like other women's agencies, say that the bill must reach beyond a criminal justice response and also cover policies on housing, education, health and welfare? My quick other question is, the government has promised 20 million extra funding for domestic abuse. Will Jewish Women's Aid get any of that funding? Thank you.
Thank you. So as far as the first question is concerned, our belief and understanding is that domestic violence is not just situated within the criminal justice area, and absolutely the government needs to provide a response that covers welfare, education, health and housing, because people affected by domestic abuse are impacted across all of those areas, and just to focus on criminal justice wouldn't solve the problem and wouldn't particularly be a holistic response for the women concerned. So that's the first question. The second, I would like to think we'd be able to get some of the money that is coming through, and we've put in a couple of bids already, so we are hopefully going to benefit from it.
Janet Trasman, Deputy for Finchley Progressive Synagogue. I've been solicitor for 40 years and spent most of the first 15 years undertaking work for women who were involved in domestic violence disputes. When the government withdrew legal aid for mostly everything, they did, thank God, continue it for domestic violence. So the funding should not be needed for solicitors and legal work, because that is already covered. And there are plenty of Jewish solicitors in northwest London, to my knowledge, and other areas who undertake this work because they have a legal aid franchise. So you don't need money for that. What you do need money for, of course, is the PR, the organisation and the publicity that women can obtain help. And as for domestic violence, not being within the criminal jurisdiction, of course it is. The clue is in the word violence. It's a criminal offence. I don't have a question. I wanted to give the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have an arm here, a committee called BOTSA,
the Board of Deputy Social Action Group. And Naomi addressed them and really inspired them. When we came to think of the first guest speaker for this triennium, we could think of no better. The content, the organization, and the CEO behind it. On your behalf, I thank you, Naomi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Please, you're very welcome to stay for the session. We would welcome you. Moving on to the divisional reports, I would like Amanda Bowman to first present her report for the Defence Division. Amanda.
Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me? No.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Deputies. So this report covers the period from July up to October, and you've all been sent a copy of the report, which covers our work looking at religious freedoms, at extremism and anti-Semitism, and at campus affairs. And so over the period since July, we've been working on our divisional plan and at the same time electing our Vice Chairman, Gary Mond, and dealing with the issues of those three important aspects of our work. The President's report covers our work on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, so I'm not going to talk about that in any detail at this point. But I would like to talk about the report last week from the Home Office, which showed a 40% increase in hate crime in general, of which 52% of those was religious hate crime. Incidents against Jews reported by police represented 672 cases, and 12% of those religious hate crimes. And so the work of the Board of Deputies, the CST and others is really important in helping to address this and keep us safe and secure. In terms of religious freedoms, we've been working on a whole range of issues which are covered here, not least around the work that we've been doing on issues relating to the coroner and end of life care. We've also been working, as you'll be aware, on issues around organ donation. And I'm happy to take questions on any of that. In terms of campus affairs, it's been a quiet time because students have been on vacation for the summer, but we haven't been idle, and we've been meeting with the UGAS and with universities to look at issues and to try and preempt issues that may come up in the future, and planning on how we will work in close concert with both the chaplaincy, UGAS and others to protect and ensure that all our students have a safe, secure and good life on campus. To support that, we're very welcome in joining that Jake Berger has joined the Board of Deputies as our new Education Policy and Youth Engagement Officer, and we'll be happy to welcome Jake at his first events meeting tomorrow when we meet tomorrow evening. Any questions?
Robert Sachs, Belsize Synagogue. I'm very concerned about the hate crimes against Jews and steps taken by the police and the Crown Prosecution Service against them. There's just been a report, I have a report here of the Times of Israel. Many deputies will have seen this attack on 2 women at a Labour Party conference. This was clearly a case of assault. This should be followed up by a prosecution. Will the Defence Division be following that and ensuring that there is a prosecution following those assaults?
Well, thank you, Robert, and I hope that I can answer your question more fully than I was able to at the last meeting. As you are aware, that incident is currently being explored by the police. And at this point, we're waiting to see what the results of that police investigation is. When we have the full facts, then we will be able to examine them both as a division and more broadly. But until that is the case, we believe this is a police matter and we need to leave it to the police to explore it. Of course, we condemn any attacks on anyone, but we do need to have all the facts before we act.
May I ask whether you would publish the results?
Can we have the next question? Because we've got a long list of people and you've already spoken once. Thank you.
Brian Gadala, Deputy for Finchley United Synagogue. First of all, may I congratulate you on the work you're doing and on all our behalf, particularly in the field of anti-Semitism, particularly with regard to the Labour Party. I was very interested by the document that was attached to your report concerning the board's submission in response to the government's request for input into prepaid pension plans. Now, the document, I read it, is utterly unexceptionable. It's a statement of basic truth, and one couldn't possibly find anything particularly to object to in it. However, I felt that it was, shall we say, somewhat anodyne and could have gone a lot further, in that there are clearly areas in which the Board of Deputies representing the Jewish community as a whole could have engaged more with the government on the subject of prepaid pension plans, particularly in regard to the perceived opaqueness of many of our burial societies, and in particular in the area of issues where transferability between burial societies.
Thank you. We're on number. It's a question, not a statement, please.
No, I'm just asking whether it would have been possible for there to be more engagement on areas that...
Can we be more concise in our questions, because we want to get through a lot today?
I'll take all the questions and then come back. Thank you, Brian.
Richard Cooper, Portsmouth and South Sea Hebrew Congregation, echoing and reinforcing what Robert Sachs said about this attack on these two middle-aged ladies. I'd just like to say they were protesting loudly and, dare I say, ironically, but at no point did they resort to anything illegal or any form of incitement. And these two ladies, I won't name them, have indeed challenged the board very robustly on occasion, but that's not the point. I'd like the assurance that the Defence Division, speaking on behalf of the board, would speak out to condemn this completely inappropriate physical attack, because to my mind, that's kind of the point of the Defence Division, isn't it?
Right, can I thank you for that, but there's a long list of people, and if we want questions answered, we need to be brief. And I'm sorry, Janet, I need to give priority to people that haven't spoken.
It is a question, I promise you.
I would like to give priority to people that haven't spoken first. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana Levine, I represent B'nai B'rith UK on the Board of Deputies. Diana Levine. I'm putting it up. Diana Levine, I still represent B'nai B'rith UK on the Board of Deputies. Thank you. Now, Phil Rosenberg, this, by the way, is from the heading Anti-Semitism from the board's latest community briefing. It says, Phil Rosenberg attended the cross-government working group on tackling anti-Semitism to discuss the latest hate crime figures and Whitehall initiatives to tackle hate crime. I'd really like to hear what discussions took place, although I did hear a bit about the crime figures. Thank you. There is prosecution guidance which sets out the factors to be considered when reviewing cases and prosecuting offences which are classified as racist.
Diana, this is meant to be a question, and have you perhaps gone to the Defence Division as an observer?
I've got a question, but I'd just like to put it in a context.
You're on amber now.
This is where anti-Semitism comes into play. It's clear that Jews are considered as a race and a religion. The prosecution guidance was revised as recently as August this year.
I'm sorry, that's enough now. Thank you. What is your question? Please.
Well, there's also a code for Crown prosecutors. Now, the problem is this. There's a veritable plethora of legislation about hate crime
we're here
together, and yet more what her initiatives. And my question for the board to investigate is this. Why aren't Crown prosecutors making use of all this guidance and legislation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Irene Mansfield, now in the incarnation of Muswell Hill Synagogue, where I was a deputy from Jersey for many years.
Welcome.
Mine is a purely factual question. The Board of Deputies condemned a conservative university society, we see, whose members were photographed with a Hitler moustache and the word Judah next to a Star of David and called for an investigation. Have we heard any more about this from the Tory party?
Janet Tresman, Finchley Progressive Synagogue. On Monday I was in Manchester. My cousin said to me that her granddaughter, starting to live at Hillel House on the Leeds campus, was told under no circumstances to take part in any activities on campus, because of the Hamas and other Palestinian organisations. I want to know if this is being investigated and why is she now being prevented from taking part in student activities on campus?
One more.
Before that's answered, my name is Lawrence Saffer from Leeds, Beth Madrasa Gadol Shul, and also Life Vice President of the Jewish Representative Council. Students are safe in Leeds. They can do whatever they want. It's a haven for Jewish people to be as they wish. If your relative has been told to do something, it's nonsense.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, I've got a message to tell me to be concise. So please come and talk to me later if you want a fuller response. So Brian, firstly, your question about the issue on the prepaid funeral plans and whether we were being anodyne or not. As you know, we aim to represent across the whole Jewish community, and that means that sometimes we have to come up with, in your words, not mine, slightly more anodyne statements and find a middle way. We do our best, and there are always views at one end of the spectrum and the other, but as we will discuss in our discussion later, we need to find that way that everyone believes is the right path along. Richard, you asked about whether we would condemn the violence against the two protesters. And I just refer back to the fact that when we have all the facts, then absolutely, if the facts allow us, we will condemn any violence that goes against. But at the same time, we fully reject any violent protest, and so we need to understand both what was going on with the protesters and the response to those protesters. Deanna, you asked about whether more information on the meeting that Phil went to with the cross-government working group. He's happy to make an update available to those that are interested, or if you want to see him today, he can give you more information. Marilyn, the issue around the statement we made around the photo of the young people being inappropriate. We've been assured by Brandon Lewis, who's the chair of the party, that action is being taken, and we will follow up if we don't hear in due course. And Janet, your issue around young people being told that they shouldn't get involved in student activity on campus, that is absolutely the work of the work that UJS are doing, but that we're doing within the Defence Division. And if there are any particular incidents, then please bring them to our attention and we can deal with them. If I've missed anyone, I apologise, but I do know we need to move on. Thank you.
Deputies, thank you. can I please say that I want as many as possible of you to speak and have a chance to. So can questions be clear and concise and not used as an opportunity, please, to make statements? And if anyone wants to know more about the work of the division, again, it's very open for you to attend all the meetings as an observer, and I would encourage you to do so. Sheila, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Marie. Good afternoon, Deputies. I would first of all like to echo what Marie said. Thank you so much for all the support I've been shown over the past few weeks. Let's please draw a line under all this stuff and get on with what's really important to our community. Okay, I'm very pleased to present my report to you today. We've been really busy. We've had to squash it into 2 pages, and the font is tiny, and I apologise, but we can't leave anything out. This means that some of the context, the background, what went on in meetings needs, if anybody wants any information, please do get in touch, or as Marie says, come along as an observer. I had 20 people at my meeting last Tuesday, and many of those people were as observers, and I welcome you all. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my International Relations Officer, Marius. You can see how busy he has been as well. I look forward to the next month, and again, if anybody has any questions, please, this is your opportunity.
Questions, not statements. Lionel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lionel Koplowitz, Senior Past President. Madam Chairman, I'd just like to ask the Senior Vice President two points. She's been to an awful lot of embassies, and they've discussed, for example, at the Austrian embassy, the call to ban shechita in Austria. Now, we know about that. What we really want to know is, did you get any commitment from the ambassador that they would align themselves with us and try and reverse that particular decision? That's what's really important. The second point is the question and the meeting with the Danish ambassador about circumcision. Well, this is an absolute fundamental Jewish right, mentioned in last week's Sedra. Did you get any commitment there again to reverse that particular decision? And finally, I want to put this point to you. When you go to visit different embassies, have you, first of all, checked with the relevant Jewish representative body in the countries concerned that they are happy for you to do this? For example, did you speak to the Zentralrat der Juden in Österreich before you went to the Austrian embassy?
Absolutely.
I want to hear your answer to those questions.
Thank you, Lionel. Absolutely, we engage with the Jewish communities to get their guidance and to make sure they're happy. With the Austrians, I can explain that they're very supportive of the work they do, but they do have an element of their coalition that is far right, as you say, and there was a call out to examine the practice of shechita. This has not been happening. We have got a good relationship with them, and they would get back to us if this looked like any progression was happening at all, okay? They can't undertake per se to say this is going nowhere, but the most important thing I do is to establish a good relationship with these embassies so we can have a conversation if issues arise. And on that point, we went to the Danish embassy, we met with the diplomatic advisors, and there is a petition that needs 50,000 signatures calling for the banning of Brit Milah, our ritual circumcision. Okay, what has happened is this 50,000 signatories, if they are gained, it has to go for investigation to a government select health committee. Okay? If that happens, we've been assured it would still be thrown out of the Parliament. We're not happy with that. We are engaging with them all the time, and we are establishing this relationship so we can be updated at every stage. And I thank you for your question. Thank you. Is that for me, David?
I just want to... David, that's fine. I just want to mention to deputies, we were hoping for a debate.
We will.
We are going to have not very much time or less time for the President's statement.
We will.
David May, Leicester Hebrew Congregation. Very quick and concise question, Sheila. Are any of the meetings available on Skype or any other media facilities? Because people like myself and others from the provinces can't attend the meetings. We can't just pop along to something in London. It would be very good if we could arrange that. Thank you.
Absolutely. You give us tell us you want to join by Skype and it can be arranged. Thank you. For anybody.
Thank you. Edwin, could you now present the report for the Community and Education Division?
Good afternoon. We had our first formal meeting of the division. In it, every single member or those who showed up were assigned a task and a job for the next 3 years. 31st of October is our next meeting. Each one of them will present what he understood about that task and what skills he requires. After that, he will actually come to you, to the deputies themselves, for help and assistance. So you should expect from our division requirements for you to help us in our work once the task is there. That's why I'm apologizing that we will not have observers again in the 31st of October, because we are working first on the internal division of task, and then we'll come to you with requests to help and to co-opt as well. On the 7th of November, we are running a workshop for non-Jewish teachers teaching GCSE, Jewish GCSE. This is a fantastic day which we are working with the JLC hand in hand in putting it to the community. It's an initiative of our staff, and it is already filled out. We are also looking for Equalities Champion. We require someone from the floor. We had a couple of applicants already. Please apply this coming week, and the 31st of December we will appoint one. The Equalities Champion, as it says, will check out on underrepresentation, will check out both on our work, the staff, the HOs, and what's happening in the community, and report back to the executive. So anyone with experience or would like to do this job, please write to me in the next 6 days. The last thing I just want to say is to welcome, as part of the interfaith work that we do, Oliver Mayembe, who is the founder of Christians Watchmen Over Zion, who has been who has brought 30, 40 people of his committee to many of the synagogues that welcomed him, including ours in Bournemouth. So if anyone would like to host them over Shabbat, they are a wonderful addition to and a spiritual addition to our work. Thank you very much. I'll now answer any questions you may have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Jeremy Friedman, South London Liberal Synagogue. A question and a congratulations to start to the President, for in your report you mentioned a round table with the Haredi educators. And I thought that is wonderful, because I cannot recall a similar incident where the Haredim have been involved in a key event. My question is there any move towards perhaps inviting the Haredi to consider their membership of the board again? I am holding, but I won't take too long, the speech I made 20 years ago at this board, which was entitled Communal Peace. And the then President of the United Synagogue, Elkan Levy, and the chairs of Reform, Liberal and Masorti movements over several years put together a paper which became known as the Stanmore Accords. Those accords have held for 20 years. I would welcome the Haredi to come back again. Even if we don't agree with everything, it doesn't matter.
It's a very good question, and the Stanmore Accords have indeed held for many years. The Haredi community, in my opinion, are not going to rejoin the board. There are many issues, including the ecclesiastical authorities, and also the fact that there are women and members from progressive communities that sit here. But taking that aside, we really do work together. behind the scenes, the coroner's case that I worked on in particular, we had a huge amount of cooperation and cooperation in many areas of life. So we all work together very well with the Haredi community, and we must work on all that we have got in common, and we will make every effort to help where we can, but I do not foresee that they will want to formally sit with us here. But if they did, they would be most welcome. Chaim.
Question for Edwin. Chaim Ben Sion from Masorti Judaism. Edwin, I'm a little bit frustrated as possibly many other people who served as observers or came as observers to the CED, to your division in the past. I certainly feel a little bit locked out, as possibly other people do. The very applaudable activities that the division is running, Invest in Peace, involves me, my shul in St Albans, as does the Jewish Living Experience, also St Albans, that we're having in February. So my request, or my question is, can you not rescind your blockage of observers for the October meeting, please?
Brian Humphreys, Finchley Reformed Synagogue, but this is really an addendum to the report. It's to do with Mitzvah Day. Mitzvah Day, as you know, is next 18th November. We're not having a board meeting that day. For a number of years, the board has made a collection for its own Mitzvah Day project in aid of the Shelter from the Storm, which is a local homeless shelter, the only shelter that is open 24 hours, not 24 hours, or every day of the year, throughout the year. We're going to again repeat the collection. We will be collecting toiletries, male and female toiletries, or male and female clothes and underwear. There will be further announcements, but please do come on the 18th of December, which is when we're doing it. We'll bring your contributions to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian.
Brian Mark, Jewish Student Chaplaincy Scotland. As somebody who made about 2,000 FOI requests last year, I always like to go to the meetings that I'm excluded from. I'm always found in local government. Those are the meetings that you ought to go to. So can I come to the meeting that's not open? Because I suspect it's a very interesting meeting.
Okay, yes. Right, so the only question I have is, Chaim, I actually, from the beginning, I didn't want tourists to come to the division. I didn't want observers who walk in, out, they choose their timing. I'm looking really for a commitment for 3 years. Those people who stood and won election should be given the priority to choose and pick the areas of work and the task they want to do. They will then, I promise, not a single person who wants to contribute to the vast division that we have, not a single one will be left out. But just give me the time, next 2 division meetings, to establish a line of communication and to establish tasks and works that we need help with and to co-opt the right people. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on to Stuart's report, please?
Yes, it's working. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be succinct because we're running 3 minutes behind. For those of you who are new or simply have questions, as per the report that I submitted, detailed financial information is available routinely. If you have specific questions about the minutiae of our management information packs, I wouldn't necessarily put them today simply because of the limitations time. This is not an embargo though. I'll just tell you overall we're in reasonably good shape, but my message continues to be that we are not out of the woods long term. The numbers so far this year are fairly benign, but fundraising continues to be an issue, and where you can make a contribution as deputies, many of you have stepped up sponsoring tables, taking tables, inviting people, signing up for the imminent President's Dinner, for which Gillian and the staff and Sheila, who's led the organisation of this, from amongst the volunteers, should be commended. It's a sellout, which is great news. That's happening very soon. But we really need more of you to step up when we have fundraising events, and if you can't come to the dinner, there's still time to make a contribution, a donation, however large or small. It really does make a difference to us. You can also make a difference in terms of encouraging your synagogues or the other organizations you represent to take up their full representation rights. Not all of you do, and also to help us to increase our take with the communal contribution. That's not as high as it might be. Now, those two areas, plus fundraising in general, are a real priority going forward. We have a working group that's going to be getting stuck into that. We've also, at last, brought someone on board, Sarah David, who's joining us from the JLE shortly, to help us from within the board staff to move fundraising forward. We will have working groups in all sorts of other areas, running from risk management to investment. And there will be a plan that will be made available to deputies in due course. Aside from that, tomorrow sees our first formal meeting. We've had a couple informal ones that have helped to get new people up to speed, so we're hitting the ground running pretty much. And I'm pleased to say that we have a very keenly contested election for vice chair with no fewer than 4 candidates. Excellent people, in no particular order: Jonathan Davis, Sid Braham, Richard Sassoon and Tony Seymour. I wish them all luck, and that's really all I'm going to say at the moment. We are in good shape for the time being. We are not out of the woods. We really, it does make a difference when deputies make a push with their own organisations to help us raise more money. That's all I have to say at this stage.
Does anyone have any concise questions? Flora? Robert? And then after this, whilst they're coming to the stand, I'm going to ask Denise Lester and Laura Marks to come to the stand just to talk to you about the Ajax Parade. So if they'd like to make their way there, that would be helpful to save some time. Thank you.
Flora Frank, British Amuna. This is a question arising from a very pleasurable Shabbat lunch we had with Marie, who came representing the board as our new president. And we heard, Marie, the crucial and vital work that we do in the board. So I'm very interested to know, what sort of percentage do we get from the levy? In other words, I don't ever make myself clear. We have synagogue organisations, we've got charitable organisations. I'm British Amuna, they pay a lot of money for me, and I'm very concerned about, what is the income?
Well, you're really playing into the concern that I express time and again, that we're not necessarily raising as much as we could proportionate.
So can you give me an idea?
I can't give you the figure off the top of my head now.
Can it be forthcoming for all the deputies?
I'll be very happy to share with deputies that one of our intentions during the course of this triennium is to publish periodically where we've got to in exactly that regard.
It's crucial.
Exactly.
Just very quickly, Stuart, when you say we're not out of the woods, but we're doing well, thank God, but what has happened with the money, with the sale of the property that we had? I mean, I don't understand.
I don't know what the here is about. It's invested.
It's not a here, it's a genuine concern, and we do have that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that a question or just yelling? Robert?
But please answer that.
Of course. I'll answer that question immediately. As we've spelt out in previous reports, we have employed an external professional advisor to help an investment working group to oversee the work of 2 professional firms who've been managing our money quite successfully so far. So until the end of September, they were pretty much exactly in line in terms of their performance with the medium-term objectives that we'd set them, I'm pleased to say. And that's money that's put aside, and for the time being, we can say it's okay. But thanks for asking that. Robert.
Stuart, good afternoon. Robert Fessenstein, Prestwich Hebrew Congregation. I see from an organisational perspective you've brought on 3 more members of staff. The Defence Divisional that have reported there's another member of staff. Yes. There's no contact details on the board website, and there's no organisational structure available to deputies. Would it be possible from an organisational perspective to circulate deputies with a list of who everybody is, who they report to, and how we might be able to get hold of them in the event of requirement from our constituencies?
I turn to Gillian on that, as I do with most things to do with HR and organisational charts, but I don't find that objectionable.
The website will be updated as it is, and all the information is on there about people's responsibilities and also their email address. But if you've got any queries, just come to me and I'll happily deal with them.
But the fundraiser hasn't started yet. Okay. She's about to join. But
Denise Lester.
Thank you. That's the end of Stuart's report.
Thank you so much.
Right, Denise, would you like to address us, please, about the Ajax Parade?
I'm addressing everyone, actually, not just the newer deputies. The Board of Deputies has, for years, in conjunction with Ajax, been extremely proud to support Ajax and to support honouring the fallen. And this is a significant anniversary this year. I would urge all of you that are able and able-bodied, please, to give some small time and commitment, if you're not committed elsewhere on Mitzvah Day projects or in any event, to participate in the march. We did have a drop in numbers last year. If you do want to march, please feel free to contact me so I can compile names, and by my email, and I know the board's offices have been very good in the past, so we can send that out. And also, would you please make your way more specifically to Horse Guards Parade after the family event. So we're looking at 1:15, 1:30, and you need to marshal there, and you'll be under the board's banner. It is a very moving occasion, and as those who have served are declining in age, we're showing respect for our ancestors and those in this country who have served in the various wars and also in the more recent wars. We have an enormous support from the police and the services, and as British Jews who serve as to uphold the values of this society in an ever-changing age, I urge you to please march and to participate in this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Laura.
Laura Marks, the Association of Jewish Women's Organisations. Following on from what Denise says, and totally in support of that, on Mitzvah Day, which is the 18th of April, which this year there isn't a board meeting. 18th of November, thank you. And there isn't a board meeting that day. There's 3 ways I would suggest you might like to be involved in things. One is to do exactly what Denise says, and there's always been a very strong turnout from deputies to march, particularly people who've got a veteran background, a veteran family member, somebody they'd like to come. I went last year and marched with my dad and my daughter, and I have to say that Ajax, it is the most incredible day out, very, very moving, as Denise says, really is, yeah. And the second thing that you can do, of course, because it's not on a board meeting day, you can be involved in something in your own local community. And one of the reasons that people have often asked why they're on the same day, the board meetings, because people have said, well, they can't do anything in their own local community. But there's deputies here from all around the country, and it's our opportunity as a community to go out and show how much we give back to local society. So do something locally. And the third opportunity is something that we're working on with Ajax very closely, which is to provide stewards and marshals at the event. And so it's another way that remembrance can be a mitzvah. And if you would like to be one of the stewards at the event, we thought that this is something that people who are not going to march anyway, but who maybe haven't been, who'd like to come along and see what it's like, and would like a job to do, get in touch with me, or again, you can do it through Bernice. We'll send out a way to do it. And come along and show your support for Ajax by helping out, showing people the way around, helping some of the people who are maybe in need of a bit of help. And it'll be another way to get involved in doing a mitzvah. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really important for you to do anything that you can on Ajax. And I myself have marched since I was about 13 years old with the Jewish Lads and Girls Brigade. So please, will you come and give support? We're now going to move on to the debate. This is a trial. It's a pilot. We need to refine how we conduct the debate. So I would ask you to be very, very patient. The successful title that was chosen was from Andrew Gilbert, who is the representative for Reform Judaism. So I would like to remind you what the debate is going to be about, which is, whilst there are many issues of consensus in our community, there are various issues of division. How can the Board of Deputies engage with minority opinion? So I'd like to call up first Andrew Gilbert, and afterwards the list of speakers, if they can get please to the microphone: Joe Millis, Chaim Ben Susan, Stephen Daniels, David Safir, Ilana Davis, Tao Ofer, Robert Sachs and Brenda Friedman. Whoever of those wants to speak, please come to the microphone. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please do not go into the red. Let's hear it.
Hi, Andrew Gilbert, Reform Judaism. This wasn't from myself, this is actually from my constituency, and it was but the request of the constituency, particularly after the mix of opinions around Israel in our community and how those are expressed and how they can be expressed in a way that brings credit to the board in its role and credit to deputies. Clearly, we all, on many issues, we don't agree with each other, and we also disagree with other people in the Jewish community. However, it's quite clear that we were all created in the image of God, and equally, even in the Talmud, Elu v'elu divrei Elohim hayim, we see there are many, many, many different truths. And as a community, we have to do better in being able to represent different views. And the board should be a shining example, as should deputies be a shining example, in educating around different issues, in understanding and recognising it's not about minority and majority opinions, it's about the diverse opinions and needs and requirements of our community, whether it be on different views of Ofsted inspections, whether it different views on gay marriage, whether it different views on Shechita or Brit Milah. Our community is diverse, and it's massively diverse on Israel. And the disrespect and the difficulties that have been shown and were alluded to at the beginning of this meeting to Senior Vice President Gavolb shows that our organisation has much to learn, and we have to become more respectful, more understanding, and I believe that it's not about majority-minority. It's a great challenge for us all, and I hope that the board, under Marie and her team, can really show a different way and a really positive way of working.
Very good, very concise as well. You get brownie points for that. Right, can the next one? Don't be shy.
Stephen Daniels, Penny and Synagogue. Let me first say that it's really important to engage with minority opinions, but up to a point. We need to understand why people have the views that they have. We also clearly need to understand what the majority opinion of the community is, and I'll come back to this point later. We need to reflect on the differences of opinion and, where appropriate, change the view of the majority. Where, after consideration, the majority continue to believe that their view is correct, that needs to be explained to the minority, and perhaps after reflection, they will join the majority. If not, and after more discussion, and particularly if debate is damaging to our community, we should stop discussion and debate. And after a suitable period, which may be long, we can re-engage. Can I go back to the earlier point about knowing what the majority opinion is? I've only been a deputy for a few months, but I've got no idea, to be honest, how the board achieves that. I've looked at the board website and it doesn't help a great deal. There's one undated briefing note with an introduction by the president of the board, Vivian Weinman. There are approximately 100 new deputies who've been here for 5 months. How do the leaders of the board know their opinions? We haven't been asked a great deal, and I can see no process at the moment for making that happen. Perhaps today's debates could have been on a meaningful subject where the executive could have gauged the opinions of the deputies rather than talking about how we might do it in the future. The executive have the list of subjects that were submitted. Here's an idea for them. For the next debate, why don't they circulate the list to the deputies for a vote? Then we'll begin to understand majority opinion.
Thank you, Ilana.
Ilana Davis, Birmingham Progressive Synagogue. The problem that we face with minority opinions is that they can easily become divisive. But for the sake of cohesion and the future of Judaism, the board must engage with these minority opinions whilst attempting to present a cohesive and clear Jewish voice. The issue with advocating mainstream Jewish thought is that it may limit the extent to which all Jews feel they can identify with and thus get involved with the board. Some Jews who hold minority opinions may not feel comfortable identifying with the board if only the mainstream ideology is being presented, whether that is orthodoxy or conservative views. There's 2 ways that I've identified, and my constituency have provided me with ideas about how we could address this. The first is that it should be made clear to the Jewish population that the board is a melting pot of our community and all opinions are welcome. Hosting debates such as today's is an excellent way of doing this because it demonstrates that all opinions are valued and listened to. The honorary officers are great ambassadors to all sections of the Jewish community and travel the breadth of the UK to engage with the spectrum of our community. The board's present policy of countrywide engagement is the way forward. Secondly, there are a lot of committed young people who have a range of views on Israel and Palestine. It is vital that we are not leaving Jews feeling isolated or alienated or under the impression that their opinions are dismissed on issues such as Israel. Therefore, we must ensure that no one, whether they are mainstream or in the minority, suffers abuse for the opinions they hold. The board has been good at condemning this abuse under the current leadership and must continue to do so. As a final thought, minority opinions do not represent the majority of Jewish people, and the board still needs to present this clear message on behalf of the community. The extent to which an opinion is mainstream or minority can only be determined through holding debates and discussions at the board like today's. Such discussions should influence the policy presented by the board, but minority opinions cannot be given more weight than the proportion of Jews holding those views. What is most important is that there is an atmosphere created by the board in which discussion can be freely held with respect. Especially in these times, we need to ensure that we have a strong board to vociferously voice our views. Though there is work to be done, the board should not sell itself short. Steps are being made in the right direction, and one member of my constituency has told me, I cannot recall a time when the Board of Deputies has been so proactive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Stone, Finchley Reform Synagogue.
Thank
First,
you.
I would like to commend the President for her efforts reflected in her opening remarks today to get people to treat each other with respect and with tolerance. I have to admit I was wrong. This doesn't often happen, but I was wrong. I did not put Marie as my first preference for President, and that was a mistake, because I am lost in admiration at the effort she's making in this area. Amos Oz once said, to take the Middle East as an example, I believe you are all aware there are some problems in the Middle East, that what's happening there is not a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. It's a conflict between extremists on both sides and moderates on both sides. Rabbi Joel Levy, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Conservative Yeshiva in Jerusalem, said it's extremely difficult to be a passionate moderate. If you want passion, go to a Hamas meeting, go to a meeting of the extremists in the settler communities. That's where you get passion. I am a passionate moderate. I'm actually quite disappointed that we've had such a measured and even debate. I will tell new deputies, for your information, it's not normally like this. We normally have a bunch of people on both sides in the extremes shouting abuse at each other. When people are shouting abuse at us, the last thing we should be doing is shouting abuse at each other, is putting forward motions of the kind that have been put forward of late. And I hope that we will all learn from what's been going on and follow our President's advice and treat each other with respect and mutual support so that we can fight those who are shouting abuse at us.
Thank you. Tao.
Tao for Chigwell and Hainault Synagogue. I'm grateful that deputies have the opportunity to debate an issue today at the plenary. However, the topic in question is more of an issue for a consultation, in my view, which could be done offline. I think the issues that we should debate at this Board of Deputies plenaries are crucial policy issues such as Jeremy Corbyn Labour's anti-Semitism. I noticed that at least 2 deputies asked the President a question, plus I'm aware of many more who would like to debate this issue. There are a considerable number of deputies who used to be Labour members but resigned due to anti-Semitism. I'm asking, can we have a debate at the plenary on the most important issue facing our community and decide which direction we want to go? As we saw this week, when the figures of hate crimes were published, there is a significant increase in the number of anti-Semitic incidents. What was the leader of the opposition's reply? He said, we must reject the policies of division and terrorist hostile environment. Now, being British Jew, I'm not sure whether he was ironic or not, but I can understand that he may be annoyed that the Home Secretary is banning the whole of Hezbollah, which means that nobody will be able to invite friends from Hezbollah for an afternoon tea and scones in Parliament. Now, despite having many chances and opportunities to sort out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, the leadership showed that he's not interested, and for them it's a price worth paying electorally. What is the point of the board's engagement with someone who is not interested in listening or caring? The lifelong anti-racist campaigner who let anti-Semitism spread in the Labour Party, the Stop the War campaigner who remained silent on war crimes in Syria, the peace activist who engages just with one side, and the human rights champion who defends Hezbollah and Hamas. I am aware of the school of thought who says that we should keep our options open, and so there are others in Labour that do care about our concerns, including MPs and the Jewish Labour movement, and with whom we should continue to engage. But it is my view that as long as Jeremy Corbyn not meeting the conditions set out previously by the board, we should cease any ties with him and his office, just as Avi Gabay, the leader of the Israeli Labour Party, did. Otherwise, enough is enough may ring hollow. So I take this opportunity today to call on the HOs and the executive to let deputies debate Labour anti-Semitism at the next plenary on December 2nd, and to have a vote on what should be the future direction of the board on this. Thank you.
Lionel. Sorry, I'm going to let the people who are at the microphone speak, please, not from the floor. Oh, all right, thank you. Lionel.
Lionel Koplowitz, Senior Past President. The question really is here, how can the Board of Deputies engage with minority opinions? Well, that's easily done because there should be recommendations arising from each divisional report. If there's a recommendation, it doesn't have to be a unanimous recommendation. It's a recommendation, and the board can debate it. And if you've got that recommendation, then all the board has to do is to move the reference back. Now, I've not heard the reference back being moved to this board for the last 5 years. And that's the way you get a debate going, and that's the way you get a minority opinion properly expressed. And I hope, therefore, that the divisions will move to putting forward recommendations so we can have proper debates about these recommendations and minority opinions can be properly expressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert.
Robert Sachs, Belsize Square Synagogue. I think it's a very difficult matter to discuss because each of us sees life through a prism, and it's just about impossible for many people to change their mind. I prefer the word discussion to debate. In a debate, I think one tries to make one's point, irrespective of what the other person says. For me, a discussion is a search for the truth, and I would prefer a discussion. However, how to engage with the minority? I think it is by discussion, but I would say that I followed the previous president who said to a deputy one day who wanted to speak on a matter in regard to Israeli government policy, "You don't live in Israel, even though you have a home there. Therefore, we don't discuss it." I think particularly in the current climate, where attacks on Israel are now the new anti-Semitism, we have to be very careful about criticizing Israeli government policy. I'm not speaking for any particular party. I have no views. I don't live in Israel. I'm intensely interested. I'm passionate about Israel, but I can't speak to many of the policies that are followed there. When I visited my brother in Israel, I saw things I really didn't like. Some of the idealism was lost, but it became more interesting. I think we should avoid discussing Israeli political issues. I see my role and the role of deputies is to ensure that Israel gets justice, not simply approval, but justice. If we think it's wrong, I would say to somebody, I don't live in Israel, I don't know what the position is, and I can't comment on it. I think we can listen to each other. It's not sometimes easy, but that's the best we can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morris Lawson, Reading Hebrew Congregation. I want to make a point a little bit along those lines, actually. There are there are several things which we find come up, which we have very clear views on. So, for example, we have the problems of anti-Semitism, shechita, things like that, Brit Milah, which there are generally no major discussion within ourselves about the way that we appear to the outside world. On the other hand, when we get to the issues about Israel, there are often differing opinions, so we get whatever the majority is and whatever the minority is. We don't necessarily know even what those minorities and majorities are. But there's a very simple way to deal with that issue from the Board of Deputies' point of view, and that is to take a non-interventionist stance, so that all we do when issues come up is we explain Israel's position to the outside world. We don't necessarily have to say that we support it or we are against it. We simply explain why they're taking that position. And if we do that, we don't risk then inflaming ourselves, because whichever the minority is or whichever the majority is, the alternative view, we don't inflame ourselves internally, but we also don't help Israel's enemies to find arguments that they can then say, oh, well, look, even the Board of Deputies says this, that, and the other. So non-interventionist is the way that we should go on those type of subjects.
Stanley Volk, Finchley Progressive Synagogue. I've always been a lifelong supporter of the Labour Party, and like many people here and people that I know, very concerned about what's happening within the Labour Party. How can the board engage with minority opinions? In my opinion, anti-Semitism in this country is a minority opinion. At the recent Labour Party conference, the long speech that Jeremy Corbyn made on the last day included a reference to anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. As I recall, he said he hoped that a line had been drawn, with the measure that had been put in place, that a line had been drawn under the whole question of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. With a view to this statement, has our President got any plans for early next year to invite Jeremy Corbyn or one of his close aides to address the board, to give us a talk and invite questions from deputies? Thank you.
Chaim Ben Zion, Masorti Judaism. So many points have been made, I don't want to make them again, so if I may just relate to the Israel. Can you hear me? Sorry, there have been complaints that you can't hear. Yeah? Can you hear me around? Can you hear me here? Great. Okay. I mean, the question, I guess, is what is our consensus as a representative body of Jewish shuls and organizations? Surely our consensus would be based on our Jewish values. For example, kavod habriyut, dignity for all humans, chesed, as in ahavta le'erecha kamocha, lo ta'amod, to not stand idly by in an injustice, darchei shalom, compassion for both Jew and non-Jew, and ahavat ger, love of the stranger. So I actually believe I could say B'emunah Shlima in the stand of the board in outing and fighting against anti-Semitism here in the UK. This is right. In past stands to defend the rights of Jewish minorities around the world, in the stand of the board in siding with our UK Muslim communities who are coming under increasing racist attack. That is right. And in the stand, and here it gets controversial, I'm afraid, but in the stand of the board in support of non-Jewish minorities in our Jewish state of Israel. Now, I want to backtrack a little bit and say that with relation to Israel, a consensus I would think would surely mean our unconditional support of Israel as our Jewish homeland and of her right to exist as a democratic nation. And as a representative organization, the board getting involved in Israeli internal politics or how best to make peace is therefore not our domain, I believe, as an Israeli citizen, having lived in Israel for 25 years. And I lived amongst non-Jewish minorities in the Western Galilee, so I fully understand this huge slap in the face to these minorities of certain clauses in the Jewish nation-state law, one of which was to remove Arabic as an official language. To bring it closer to home, and sorry, I should say that I also understand why hundreds of thousands of Druze, Bedouin and others demonstrated for the first time as a community in Tel Aviv, which is a sort of similar thing to what we did as a Jewish community on March the 30th in Parliament Square. To bring this closer to home, I would ask the question, if Her Majesty's government would demote the Welsh language, then you can expect to see mass demonstrations from Cardiff to Bangor to London. Dr. Gavolb, on behalf of our board and honorary Welsh person, has made the right choice, the just choice, and, in my opinion, the Jewish choice.
Brenda Friedman, Northwest Reformed Synagogue.
Come closer, please.
Brenda Friedman, Northwest Reformed Synagogue. The Board of Deputies has so many different opinions, it's obvious that there's not ever going to be a consensus. But I wonder why this debate that we're having is not actually structured as a debate, where you usually have somebody for the motion and somebody against the motion, in which case we could then end with a vote.
I'm going to answer that, actually, because nobody submitted the appropriate question for the debate, which was why I said this is very much trial and error and it's more like a discussion. So if deputies would be more considered in what they propose to have for a debate, then we can actually have a debate. But this is the first one, so let's give ourselves a break. You're giving your opinions.
Okay, but I would also like to say that in order to have a debate and a real understanding between deputies, you have to show respect for each other, you have to listen to each other, and you have to be flexible enough to change your opinion, and also enjoy the debate instead of mudslinging. So I hope that when we do have a proper debate, that's what will go on.
Amen to that.
Thank you. Karen Newman from the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. I just wanted to say about this particular debate, and I think it's a good and important topic for us to be discussing, that as we are the Board of Deputies for British Jews, our legitimacy to claim to speak for British Jews is damaged if we do not systematically make ways of incorporating minority views. We have to speak to minority views, we have to understand them, and then the skill that we need, which we have on the top table at the moment, fortunately in spades, is the ability to craft consensus from those different views. I think that's what we have to do. I remember a chief executive of an organization I used to work with used to say, if you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, take people with you. The final thing I want to say, which may or may not be because Aretha Franklin died this year, is the watchword has to be respect. We have to find a respectful way for talking to each other, with each other, and arguing with each other. If we want people outside our community to respect us, we need to find a way to respect each other.
Brian Mark, Jewish Student Chaplaincy Scotland and a member of Newcastle North Constituency Labour Party. It was Chairman Mao who said, let 1,000 flowers bloom and 100 thoughts prevail. What we are is a democratic body, not a democratic centralist body. As an advocate, I put forward views. I don't destroy the views of my opponent. You light two fires and people look at the arguments. So even though we may be a disputational people, the right to disagree strongly, the right to put your case, and the right for somebody to put the case against you is what will make this organisation grow, and without it is what will destroy this organisation. And the attack, I often see at the board here, attacks on Yachad. Well done. The more you attack them, it's another 50 members. If you really want organisations to grow, attack them. People will have views that they don't like. People will have different views. For example, we're going to see the Jewish Leadership Council decide on the report on the Audit Commission. Will that be a minority view or not? I have to tell you, I'll take my job of speaking truth to power, and if it's not dealt with adequately, I might express in the most robust but polite terms my view of that failure. And it's very important not to be frightened of dissent and not to be frightened of harsh language. It's not swearing, it's not shouting. If you feel that you want to talk about an issue, that's fine. When Sheila Gilbert spoke about the nation-state law, that's a law that I think is deplorable, and I'm entitled to have that view. I'm entitled to express that view. I've spoken to it at public meetings in Newcastle. I've been involved in funding organisations in Israel in challenges to the Supreme Court. So I have confidence in that view. I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm not a self-hating Jew, but I'm critical of the state, which is perfectly fine to be. And I want the board to succeed, I want the president to succeed. One of the things that I think we do have to discuss, though, is the question of our relationship with the Labour Party. It's not for the Jewish Leadership Council, it's not with respect for the president, it's for the community to be involved in. And I have to say there are two debates we should have had. One was on the nation-state law, and the second should have been our relationship with the Labour Party. It's not for the Machas to decide, it's for the board, because the board is a parliament. And really, if you're not careful, we will turn into wallpaper. It's not the intention of those involved, but it's very easy to say you'll involve people. It's extraordinarily difficult to do so. But can I also say this, if you come all the way from Newcastle or from Scotland, you want more than 3 minutes. These meetings will have to be longer. These meetings will have to be longer to allow a larger number of people to debate, 3 to 4 minutes, and of course to do so respectfully. Thank you for calling the debate.
Thank you. Thank you. This will be the last contribution. Thank you.
Irene Mansfield, Muswell Hill United. I have to say that this has been a somewhat unstructured discussion. I would say it was more like a chat today, and that's not really what a debate is. So perhaps you've billed it wrongly. Also, it has allowed people to go off at a tangent about what we should be discussing rather than what we are discussing. And I think that we need to structure it rather better. I think that we become obsessional about certain things, and that's been illustrated today, and it may be the kind of things that may be an expression of what we're worried about. But I would say one thing, that there are limits to being able to accommodate minority opinions, and that is when they become egregiously racist or against the interests of the Jewish community. And we have had an example of a deputy who has gone beyond the red line, and therefore I don't think that we can attempt to accommodate all strands of opinion and all ideas, because there has to be a red line somewhere.
Thank you. Can I say I've very much enjoyed listening to everyone. A big criticism from the deputies last triennium was that nobody had the chance to speak and to express their opinion. So we've all sat and we've listened to people, and I did say it's the start of wanting to have a debate and a pilot, but it also takes some imaginative thinking out of the box from deputies. So next time, for next plenary, I suggest that if you've got an idea for a debate, you get your approval of your constituency, but then you go and find someone who can oppose it so that you can have a structure for a debate. But we can only work with what was put to us. So it needs some thought from you as well. It can't just come from us if you want to have debates, which I want to encourage. But I still think it was very good to talk and to listen, and I've come away with some very positive thoughts from what you've all said. So I want to say thank you for everybody to come up, and thank you for everyone being very polite and letting everybody say what they wanted to say without any anger, and everybody has been very good-natured, so thank you. Can we now come on to the President's statement? I'd like to go through the muzzle toffs quickly. Muzzle toff to Marilyn Keane on her golden wedding anniversary. Muzzle toff to Gordon Globe on the birth of a grandson. To Stanley Sofa, also on the birth of a grandson. Judith Flax Lee on her recent wedding. Henry Grunwald, past president, on the wedding of his son. Louis Rappaport on his grandson's engagement. Paul Edlin on the birth of a granddaughter. And we have a family announcement here. Deborah Cohen, Adrian Cohen, and Margaret Abrahams on the marriage of their daughter, niece, and cousin, respectively. Rafua Shalamas, I can see that Roger and Susan, and I hope Malcolm, are sufficiently recovered as they're all here today. Condolences to the family of the late June Jacobs, who was a long-standing deputy and lifelong campaigner, and we have already said a tribute, and again condolences to the family of the late Joe Wagerman. Could I briefly mention the board's dinner? For the first time, the board's dinner is oversubscribed, just so you know. But what's important is this is a fundraising dinner for the board, and it's the one time in the year that we have to shine, and it's really, really important to us to raise as much money as possible, either through sponsorship or donations. So if you know somebody or you can't come, in the nicest possible way, it doesn't prevent a donation being given to the board for all of its good work, because it's very, very difficult to get funding, as you all know. So can I ask you to bear that in mind, and if any of you know any companies that would like to still become involved and get one of our sponsorship packages, could they please contact Sheila? And we want to thank you for all of the support for the board's dinner. Thank you for that. I'll go through parts of the report, and then I'll take questions. I imagine there might be a few. So it's been a long, hot summer, And as my report says here, it was a pretty torrid one for the Labour Party, who continued to want to dictate to the Jews. And finally, we have seen that they have accepted the IHRA definition and all of the examples. We still, however, need to see action and not words. And there clearly have to be a number of issues which I've already addressed that have to be resolved. On the question of engagement, I just want to say that if the board were to stop engaging with the Labour Party, we would lose all our power, and suspending relations with the party might create a big headline, but I think it would leave us nowhere and no wriggle room. And I've always said that engagement doesn't mean concession. And if we walk away from the Labour Party, are we going to leave and hang out to dry the very, very brave individuals that have been fighting the good fight? People like Luciana Berger, Louise Ellman, who is here, who might like to just come up and just say a few words on that. And also Luciana Berger, Margaret Hodge, Ian Austin, Joan Ryan, and the Jewish Labour Movement. So there would be a lot to walk away. And I just want to give, it's not scripted, so forgive me, can I give Louise Ellman 2 minutes? Thank you. And Ruth Smith.
Louise Ellman, MP, Jewish Labour Movement. I think it is absolutely essential to keep the Labour Party under pressure on and dealing with anti-Semitism. It is all very well Jeremy Corbyn saying at conference that he wishes to draw a line under this issue, yet we still have Jackie Walker, who goes up and down the country with her show The Lynching of Jackie Walker, a member of the Labour Party, after she said the Jews were main financiers of the slave trade. There are daily new cases of anti-Semitism, and Ian Austin, MP for Dudley North, still faces disciplinary action from the Labour Party for speaking out. So I am absolutely clear that the Labour Party must be kept under pressure, and I think that the board has played a very important part in making the Labour Party face this issue. And it's done that because it has been resolute in its action. It has had a very clear, unequivocal message and has been resolute and has been acting with others. But I'm absolutely clear that that pressure has to be maintained. But the way in which that pressure has to be maintained must be for the President and the board to decide how to deal with it. Circumstances can change. No dealings with Jeremy Corbyn in his office might be right in certain circumstances. There could be changes. We don't know exactly how it will go. So I say we should be unanimous in saying we must be resolute in our opposition to Labour's shameful anti-Semitism. The pressure must be kept on the leader of the Labour Party and the party as a whole. And the way in which that has done must be left to the President and the officers to continue a very strong campaign against anti-Semitism in general, against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and on that we should speak with one voice.
And I also want to mention Ruth Smith and Labour Friends of Israel and Conservative Friends of Israel. They all need support as well, so that's all very important. Thank you very, very much for that, Louise Ellman. And we also need to make it clear that we need to combat the culture of denial of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. That's something that's very important, and to make sure that there's proper training for anti-Semitism by mainstream organisations, as well as kicking out the anti-Semites and getting Jeremy Corbyn to take personal responsibility for his actions. In returning to the President's statement, does anybody have any questions? Yes, I thought there might be a few. Go on, you can race to the microphone. Who's going to get there first? Preference is going to be given to people who have not spoken today.
Martin Watts from Northwest Surrey. So this relates to my question to the President, which you answered as the first of your answers. And I'd really like to, first of all, clarify to new deputies, just this is a copy of the Jewish Renaissance magazine that was referred to in my question. It's a brilliant, professionally produced quarterly publication for everyone in the community. It tells about minority cultures, minority views, plays, everything. I resist the temptation to go through the table of contents. In the past, thanks to the generosity of David Dangour, every deputy has automatically received a free copy of this. But now with data protection legislation, that's changed. So you actually have to opt in to get your quarterly free copy of what is the closest thing there is to being a fringe benefit for being a member of the Board of Deputies. So you will find a sheet somewhere near you. Just please fill that in and leave it at the back.
Thank you.
That was my question to all deputies. Please pick up a form and do that.
Can I please manage the situation? We've got 20 minutes. I need concise questions. Can we have perhaps 3 questions at once? Only because there's vast numbers of people wanting to speak and we have to leave the building at 1:30. Thank you.
So do I, Madam President. Sid Brown from Barnet, because my son is getting married on Wednesday, and please, I've got things to attend to.
Mazel tov.
Well, to you. My question relates to the Executive Committee report. I hope you can take my very quick questions, please. The last board meeting was on the 15th of July. Has the Executive Committee not met since then until the October meeting, which is reported? And if not, why is it? So if it has met...
Right, I'll answer that quickly. It didn't meet, or you would have had the report, and there were no vice chairs that were replaced for it to meet.
So it hasn't met?
No, it hasn't met.
Fine.
We could have
okay.
answered that.
Two very quick questions. You've got talk about the June-July meetings. July the 21st meeting next year is a fast day. It's a very difficult day. Please could another date be found, and this could be one way of respecting a minority. And the other thing is, I presume a minority, please could, it should be a majority. Key current effort, the report is very anodyne. Is there a way of getting a bit more in the report, please?
Thank you. Could the remainder of you, I'm just wanting everyone to have a chance to talk. The longer you are, the people at the back of the queue can't say anything.
Jonathan Davis, Golders Green Synagogue. There's an old saying, oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. And this government is trying very hard. It is clear, whether we like it or not, that there is a real possibility there could be a general election.
Okay, I'm going to stop this because there are all these people wanting to talk.
Can I ask a question? And Jeremy Corbyn could be elected Prime Minister. What contingency planning is the board making for those possibilities?
Next, please.
David Seelow, Brighton Hove, Progressive Synagogue. Full support for the President on her answers to whether we should have contact with the Labour Party. I put it as a question. Are you aware that in Brighton last week, a good example of having contact with the local party was that we had a situation where the Labour Party, the Green Party and the Conservative Party united at the council meeting in actually passing the IRH definition. And it's a good example of where we need to continue dialogue with parties and not stay away.
Thank you. Please, can you be as brief as possible? And questions, please, not statements. Don't even put it with a question and then say it's a question when it's not, but thank you. We've noticed that.
Martin Rankoff, Redbridge Synagogue. Congratulations on the success of the sellout of the President's Dinner. Well done. And I'm pleased that the President reminded us in her statement that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, was his first appointment was to attend Yom HaShoah. As congregants and constituents of mine point out, Jeremy Corbyn's...
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you not to continue if you don't have your question.
Jeremy Corbyn's mother attended Cable Street.
What is your question, please?
But I just wanted to congratulate you on securing such a good speaker. My question, in regard to the question that I posed regarding the VP's statement on the nation-state law, I'm not sure that your answer answers my point. You're referencing of the criticisms made by Bennett and Cologne.
You're on amber now.
Respect is the word of the day. You're referring to the criticism made by Bennett and Cologne as your defence, in my opinion, is wrong.
What is your
Firstly,
question?
both MKs were blatantly electioneering, and secondly, they, unlike all of us, pay taxes in Israel and send their kids to the front line.
That is now finished. Thank you. The next person.
This is a picture of my son who served in the IDF in 2014 during Operation Protective Edge.
You have not asked the question and you are
chose to join the IDF.
Deputies have already spent much time having to listen to...
I do not have the right
Thank you. Move on.
to comment on Israel policy.
Thank you.
At a time when the indifference shown by Labour towards the community and its overt
Okay, Deputies, this probably also is not helpful.
Decades, the statement only served to feed their narrative.
Turn the microphone off, please. Please turn off the microphone. We don't wish to hear any more. Thank you very... No, we don't. Move on, please. The microphone can... Thank you. Next, can you be brief in your question, please?
Roger Kaczynski, Radlett Reform Synagogue. Very briefly, I was disenfranchised from voting for the divisional elections. The reason I was disenfranchised is very simply that I was away. I was away during the critical 4 days that we had to make up our minds and return the voting slips. They were sent out on the Monday morning, as you will remember.
What's your question, please?
If you had registered for a postal vote and had to be returned by Friday noon.
What is your question, please? Come on, we've got all these people behind you. Come on, what's your question?
Right. The question is, what is going to be done in future to ensure that people who are actually out of the country during that critical 4-day period have the opportunity to vote?
The Constitution is going to be thoroughly reviewed by the time we get to any further elections. That's a definite. Thank you. Next question.
Brian Mark, Jewish Student Chaplaincy Scotland. One question, 3 parts. When will the Jewish Leadership Council's report on false accounting be published? 2, will all the evidence be published with it? And thirdly, will there be a full debate in it? And will you object if that report is published in a redacted form?
Next question, please. Come on, deputies, you understand what questions are. Who's going to ask a question? That's here.
Rachel Harris, under 35 observer for Hampstead Synagogue. This is my first time speaking at the board. I'd like to ask a question in regards to the recent spamming of the mailing list, which you referred to at the start of the meeting. If those emails, if the use of deputies' personal emails for something other than election campaigning could be considered a breach of GDPR, and if the board would consider issuing board email accounts to all deputies and observers to avoid incidents like this happening in future.
Mazel tov on asking the question, and especially on your first trip. Can I answer? We can't issue deputies with Board of Deputy email accounts because then it would be representing the views of the board. But deputies should only use data for the purpose it was intended, and we would certainly look at that. And thank you. Congratulations as well. Thank you.
I mentored her.
I hope yours is going to be a question.
Simone Class, St John's Wood Synagogue. Denise and Laura both spoke about the Ajax meeting on the 18th of November, but on the 17th of November, St John's Wood Shul are hosting a special Shabbat service in honour of Ajax, and would you all be, you're all more than welcome, and my question is, will you please come?
Whoa. Right, I'm just going to warn you all that at 1:26 I will be doing the President's closing remarks, so you can all sort out a lot of you are at the microphone, who is going to ask your questions.
Right, David Farby, Finchley Reform. I actually do have a question, but it's a question about your answer to one of my questions, which is to do with the production of a board plan as an overarching document for this triennial period. This is stated as necessary in the Constitution. You very kindly said in your response that a board plan is being worked on, for which I'm grateful. However, the Constitution states clearly that a board plan, a strategy, a set of implementations, should be developed within the first 3 months of a triennial period for the rest of the triennial period.
Thank you very
We're now
much.
5 months in it. Would it be possible, President, for you to accept a bit of a timetable on this and say perhaps this board plan might be produced, say, for January? That would be 8 months into the triennial. Could you do that, please?
Right, firstly, you've already, with respect, had an answer in the President's statement that we are doing a board plan, and I think that a strategic, well-thought-through plan, particularly with the Labour Party issues, is something that's very necessary, and it's in transit now, it's being worked on, so I don't really want to rush it for the sake of it, but I want to assure everybody, and you can come to the divisions, the plans that at divisional level are going to be completed soon, and that will then feed into the main board plan. So I assure you that we will have a plan, and a good one. Next, Florette.
Hi, Florette Hyman, ex-delegate for EDRA, and I'm on Observer today. I hope you don't mind if I ask a question. First of all, thank you, Marie, for coming yesterday to Shul. It was a privilege to go around with you to all the services and for you to listen to the little children who asked you all the questions, and I think one of them could possibly be a future president. He asked so many amazing questions. Thank you for that. My question is, the board is making an amazing dinner, the President's dinner, which is sold out. Congratulations, Sheila, amazing, amazing job, well done. I have a suggestion to offer you. Would you like to make a young people's dinner once a year or even once every 2 years, where the students and young professionals actually have a dinner to raise funds for the board and also potentially involve younger people to actually take the spaces on the stand in a few years' time?
Thank you. That's a very good suggestion, which we will take away. Thank you. And I'm going to be making my President's statement in a few minutes. So, final question. Final question is Jerry's.
Jerry Lewis, Hampstead Synagogue. Are you aware, Madam President, I intend during this session to carry on my previous session's activities in supporting as best I can the President of the Board?
Good to hear.
But
there's always a but, isn't there?
This is a serious issue, and I shall be very, very brief. I'll abbreviate my comments. I'm most concerned, are you aware, that there's an issue not mentioned at all in any of the documents given to us at the board concerning the forthcoming census. As was reported in the Jewish News, the board has done a U-turn on the question of ethnicity. I was a senior vice president, are you aware, that the board debated and decided to favour the Jewish issue being on the heading of ethnicity. Deputies will be aware that under the heading of religion in the census, one can indicate one's religion, but it's a voluntary question. The ethnicity question is compulsory. You may well be aware that in the last census in 2011, are you aware?
Right, can I just say you're red, so I'm going to answer. Yes, I'm aware because we've had discussions about it and it is something that's being looked at. I agree that ethnicity is important. So in terms of that, yes, I am aware because we have discussed it personally and it is something that's being actively looked at.
Can I then finally ask, please?
You're on red. I'm really sorry. I'm going to move
Just
move
ask
on.
that we actually have a debate here on the floor of the board.
You can propose a debate and find an opposer to the debate because that's how we will be proceeding next time. You're very welcome.
Thank
I need to now move on. Thank you very much for your question. Deputies, thank you very much for attending today. You've been extremely good-natured, and I think it's been a meeting where lots of you have got to the stand and you've all had an opportunity to talk, and I hope that this will be the beginning of us listening to each other again. I want to therefore end the meeting by asking you to think again about the way that we treat each other in the future. Tolerance only for those who agree with you is not tolerance, and respect involves listening to what another has to say and to respect the right to be different. It's not wrong to have a different point of view. We are at a crossroads, and there are many and varied polarized points of view. Now more than ever, we need to remember all that we have in common so that we can come together in unity to face the challenges that lie ahead. I have every confidence in you, deputies, as proud British Jews, that we can achieve this together. So I want to say thank you for attending today, and I look forward to the next plenary meeting and hearing from you in between. Thank you.
Well done. Sorry about that. We just pointed out.